Hello, my name is Gustavo San Roman and I would like to thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. I have combined my years of experience as an obstetrician with my background in computer programming and birth statistics in order to create software tools that can be used to measure, compare, and improve the care that is provided to women who will give birth. This drawing represents a cesarean birth performed in 1884 that was reported in the Edinburgh Medical Journal. This is shown to remind us that prior to modern obstetrics, every woman had a risk that her labor may not result in a vaginal birth. This risk was based on the physical characteristics of the woman and that of her baby. I call this risk inherent risk. A cesarean birth measure is a measure of the effect that the obstetrical care provider's interventions have on their patient's inherent risk. For example, obstetrical care providers that are skilled with forceps can decrease a woman's inherent risk, and inpatient obstetrical care providers can increase a woman's inherent risk. Does each woman have the same inherent risk? No, they don't. Each woman's unique combination of physical characteristics determines her inherent risk that labor will result in a cesarean birth. In an attempt to create a cesarean birth measure, the American College of OB/GYN stated in their evaluation of cesarean delivery that differences in patient characteristics probably account for some of the variations in cesarean delivery rates and explain some of the differences between practitioners and hospitals. This means that you cannot measure the effect of the obstetrical care provider's interventions without taking into account the physical characteristics of the women who are giving birth. They also stated that the highest variation in cesarean birth rates occurs among nulliparous patients with term singleton fetuses with vertex presentations without other complications. High-risk patients have much lower variations in cesarean delivery rates between practitioners and hospitals. Note the underlined part of the second statement. This part of the statement is why the NTSV case mix is mistakenly called low risk. The NTSV case mix is referred to as the cesarean birth measure for low-risk patients. But low risk for what? The NTSV case mix includes patients with placenta previa, fetal distress prior to labor, medical contraindication for labor, patients with an uninducible cervix, and women who request a cesarean birth. There is nothing low risk about patients with these diagnoses. More importantly, is that despite ACOG's statement that patient characteristics probably account for some of the variation in cesarean birth rates, the NTSV rate ignores the physical characteristics of the women that are giving birth. So just how much do physical characteristics contribute to a woman's inherent risk? Dr. Chen and his group in Florida studied the outcome of 3,355 nulliparous women who were managed by the same obstetrical group. This is important because if patients are managed by the same obstetrical group, then the results are due to the inherent risk of the women giving birth and not to the effect of the obstetrical care provider. Dr. Chen found that their teenagers had a 13% cesarean birth rate, whereas their patients over 35 had 3 times that rate. They saw a similar pattern with maternal BMI, maternal height, and gestational age. Maternal weight gain and newborn birth weight also affected the cesarean birth rate, but note that the association was not linear. They came to the conclusion that maternal age, maternal BMI, maternal height, maternal weight gain, gestational age, and newborn birth weight all significantly affected a woman's inherent risk for cesarean birth. In 2006, Dr. Elliot Main and his group in California published a cesarean birth measure based on the NTSV case mix and proved that adjusting for age was mandatory due to the significant difference between the cesarean birth rates of younger and older NTSV patients. The inherent risk due to increasing age was similar in California as it was in Dr. Chen's study from Florida. However, if Hospital A only had younger patients, then their unadjusted NTSV rate would be less than 14%. And if Hospital A only had older patients, then their unadjusted NTSV rate would be over 25%, even though the same obstetrical care providers were taking care of these patients. The effect of age on the cesarean birth rate is not limited to Florida and California. This is the breakdown of cesarean birth rates according to the National Vital Statistics Report over the past 20 years. This illustrates the significant impact of age on the rate of cesarean birth across the nation. This report also illustrates how the rates have gone up in every age group over these years. It is this increasing rate over the past 20 years that raises much concern regarding appropriate cesarean birth utilization. As a result, Healthy People 2020 has set a national goal of 23.9% for cesarean births to NTSV patients. The Healthy People 2020 national target represents an average for the entire nation. Unfortunately, some organizations like the Leapfrog Group have misinterpreted this national target as a target rate to be achieved by each and every hospital. It is mathematically incorrect to compare a hospital's unadjusted NTSV cesarean birth rate to the national target of 23.9%. For example, if your hospital has NTSV patients with an average age of 35 to 39, you haven't hit that target in the past 20 years, and you will never be able to achieve an unadjusted NTSV rate of 23.9%. The significant difference in the unadjusted NTSV rate due to the age of the women giving birth illustrates why it is impossible to measure the effect of the obstetrical care provider's interventions without adjusting for the age of the women who are giving birth. Unless, of course, if all hospitals have women of the same age giving birth. Dr. Main's group reported a mean maternal age from a high of 32.3 to a low of 21.9 in their 20 hospitals. This made it obvious that hospitals do not have women of the same age giving birth. His work confirmed the significant effect of maternal age on the NTSV cesarean birth rate. And since many hospitals have different age distributions, he proposed using a technique called direct standardization in order to level the playing field. Lastly, he noted that the age adjustment can make major differences. Dr. Main's work became the cesarean birth measure that was endorsed by the National Quality Forum, the Joint Commission, and the Leapfrog Group. Unfortunately, there is a fatal mathematical flaw in Dr. Main's work that was not recognized by Dr. Main, the editors of the Gray Journal, the National Quality Forum, the Joint Commission, or the Leapfrog Group. This fatal flaw is in the direct standardization and is called the leveraging error. It affects every hospital that does not have the same NTSV patient age distribution as the national average. For example, this is the table from Dr. Main's study, and if your hospital has the same age distribution as Dr. Main's hospital, you will find that there is only 68 patients in the 15 to 19-year-old age group. These 68 patients make up only 1% of the 7,068 births. However, this age group makes up 21% of the adjusted NTSV rate. When you do the math, you will find that one additional cesarean birth this month compared to last month in the 15 to 19-year-old age group would increase this hospital's cesarean birth measure by 10 percentage points, even though this hospital has about 500 total births each month. A detailed analysis of this error can be found on my website. It is this fatal flaw that renders the results of Dr. Main's original cesarean birth measure useless. I discovered this fatal flaw in 2010 and did my best to inform Dr. Main, the Joint Commission, and the American College of OBGYN that this flaw would render the measure useless. However, it appears that instead of going back to the drawing board and creating a better risk adjustment for age, Dr. Main began a campaign to convince everyone that the NTSV rate doesn't have to be adjusted for age. This is slide number 44 of his 2014 presentation titled Making Sense of Cesarean Birth Rates. How should we invest our QI efforts? In this presentation, he claimed that hospitals with high rates of advancing maternal age also have high rates of low BMIs, and when analyzed, they balance each other out. The first two bullet points contradict 20 years of prior research, including his own work from 2006. So Dr. Main has either made an incredible new discovery or he has made another fatal error. The third bullet point refers to a fully loaded risk adjustment and leads you to believe that his incredible discovery is confirmed coast to coast. However, if you notice the studies supporting this incredible discovery, you will find that Dr. Main's manuscript and preparation has never been published and that the second reference is even more troublesome. What is troubling about Eckert J. is that Eckert J. is not the lead author on the study for Mass General Hospital. He is the seventh author listed in the study whose lead author is Cesarean. Why would anyone list a study by its seventh author? Dr. Main is making the incredible claim that the effect of maternal BMI cancels out the effect of maternal age. However, since he is yet to publish his manuscript, perhaps it is the study from Cesarean that contains the indisputable evidence that will prove that BMI cancels out age. Keep in mind that this is the only published study submitted by Dr. Main, the Leapfrog Group, the Joint Commission, and the National Quality Forum in support of Dr. Main's incredible discovery. If we look at the covariates listed in the methods section of this study, does anyone see maternal BMI? I see mother's age, race, ethnicity, education, infant birth weight, gestational age, labor induction, hospital shift at time of birth, and pre-existing health conditions, but I don't see maternal BMI. Perhaps maternal BMI can be found inside the study in the table of covariates. Does anyone see maternal BMI there? What I do see in Table 1 is the significant effect that maternal age had on the rate of cesarean birth. The NTSV patients over the age of 35 in this study had a 41% cesarean birth rate as compared to 21.7% for the NTSV patients under 30. I also see in Table 1 some peculiar findings. The authors included maternal education and shift at birth as risk factors, but omitted the much more significant maternal BMI. It is also very peculiar as to how the cesarean birth rate for patients with placenta previa was only 71.9%. One has to question the quality of data collection in this study if somehow 28.1% of patients who have a placenta previa were delivered vaginally. Again, keep in mind that this study is the only published study referenced by the Leapfrog Group, the Joint Commission, and the National Quality Forum in order to justify removing all risk adjustments from the NTSV cesarean birth rate. A critical analysis of this study can be found at my website. In 2015, Dr. Main was the head of the Maternity Care Expert Panel at the Leapfrog Group, and the age adjustment is removed from the cesarean birth rates that they are publishing nationwide. Why did the Leapfrog Group remove the age adjustment, you might ask? They claim that research has shown that the age effect disappears when you include BMI in the model. When I contacted the Leapfrog Group and requested a list of the studies that made up the research, I was sent one study, and that was the study by Cesarean. That would be the same study that doesn't even have BMI as a risk factor. In 2016, Dr. Main was on the Joint Commission's Perinatal Care Technical Advisory Panel, and as the developer of their cesarean birth measure provided this response to the National Quality Forum when I questioned the removal of the risk adjustment from cesarean birth measure PCO2. Once again, we see that Dr. Main makes the incredible claim that maternal BMI cancels out the effect of maternal age based on the findings of only 2 studies. Since the study by Cesarean didn't have maternal BMI as a risk factor, this means that every hospital and obstetrical care provider in the United States is going to be measured using a cesarean birth measure that is supported only by an oral presentation given by the person whose last cesarean birth measure had an unrecognized fatal flaw. I did my best in 2016 to alert the National Quality Forum of the disaster that will result from using an unadjusted NTSV rate as a cesarean birth measure. This is the final submission from the Joint Commission to the National Quality Forum, explaining the decision to remove the direct standardization risk adjustment from cesarean birth measure PCO2. The first highlighted sentence indicates that the Joint Commission has finally come to admit the fatal flaw that I discovered back in 2010. Unfortunately, in the second highlighted sentence, they make their next fatal flaw. They claim that they did an analysis of 2014 discharge data with logistic regression that indicated that age strata had marginal impact on the outcome. This analysis contradicts 20 years of research, yet they didn't keep the results. How convenient. Once again, the only published study in support of their incredible findings is the study by Cesarean. One would think that this incredible new discovery would be proudly displayed on the Joint Commission's website. This is the 2017 reference list for the Joint Commission Cesarean birth measure PCO2. And it is notable that even though this list was updated after the removal of the age risk adjustment, that neither the study by Cesarean nor the oral presentation by Dr. Main made the list. However, the three highlighted studies that did remain on the list all came to the conclusion that maternal age had a significant impact on outcome. I have shown you the fatal flaw in the direct standardization age risk adjustment that was missed by Dr. Main, the editors of the Gray Journal, the National Quality Forum, the Joint Commission, and the Leapfrog Group. I will now show you the fatal flaw in Dr. Main's new incredible discovery. Dr. Chen, Dr. Main, and many others have proven that the cesarean rate for nulliparous women within a hospital increases with increasing age. And I have shown you 20 years of results from the National Vital Statistics reports that confirm that the effect of age is also present nationwide. In order for Dr. Main to make the claim that an analysis using logistic regression indicates that age strata had marginal impact on the outcome, there has to be a risk factor for cesarean birth that decreases the risk of cesarean birth for older women. Dr. Main provided that risk factor several times with his observation that hospitals with a high maternal age population also have a low body mass index, and conversely, those with low maternal age have a high BMI. Consider the logic behind Dr. Main's incredible discovery. Dr. Main can't possibly be claiming that women get thinner as they get older, because if that claim were true, then no one would have ever noticed the significant effect of age on outcome, because if older women were thinner and younger women were heavier, then these two factors would have canceled each other out, and the NTSV cesarean birth rate would be the same for all age groups. No, what Dr. Main is actually claiming is that hospitals with older NTSV patients attract women that are thinner across all age groups, and hospitals with younger NTSV patients attract women that are heavier across all age groups. For his claim to be correct, every hospital across the country would have to attract the exact combination of NTSV patients where the risk due to age and the risk due to BMI completely cancel each other out, while still maintaining an NTSV cesarean birth rate within the hospital and across the country that increases with age. This incredible discovery is based on an analysis that was thrown away, an oral presentation given by the person who gave us the previous flawed cesarean birth measure, and is supported by only one published study that doesn't even have BMI as a risk factor. Just like in the Emperor's New Clothes, it is only a matter of time before he is exposed. The last time that I exposed a fatal flaw in Dr. Main's work, it took 6 years for the Joint Commission to acknowledge the error. Hopefully, the Joint Commission will acknowledge their new fatal flaw before it does a serious disservice to both the women who are giving birth and the healthcare professionals that are assisting them. I have shown you that maternal age has a significant effect on outcome. But what about the other 5 physical characteristics identified by Dr. Chen's group? This is a bar graph of the percentage of pregnant patients that were obese by state in 2011, and note that not every state is represented. The low is 18% in Utah, and the high is 28.6% in South Carolina. This graph illustrates that maternal body mass index, just like maternal age, does not appear to be distributed equally. It follows that if BMI is not distributed equally, then just like for maternal age, a cesarean birth measure must account for the inherent risk due to maternal body mass index. What about the other 4 physical characteristics that have been previously proven to contribute to inherent risk? My analysis of 109 hospitals in New York State confirmed that these hospitals not only had important differences in maternal age and BMI, but that they also had different average values for maternal height, newborn weight, maternal weight gain, and gestational age. So it follows that unless hospitals have patients that are the same height, with the same size babies, gaining the same amount of weight, and giving birth at the same gestational age, then a cesarean birth measure must account for the inherent risk due to these other 4 physical characteristics as well. In fact, I am going to add a 7th characteristic that must be accounted for, and that is whether the onset of labor was spontaneous or induced. These are the 7 most important characteristics that affect the risk of cesarean birth for the NTSV patient who will attempt labor. Before we can measure the effect of the obstetrical care provider's interventions, we have to first measure the effect of the physical characteristics of the women who are giving birth. Looking at these 7 patient characteristics reveals that the cesarean birth rate for a typical 36-year-old that is being induced is more than 10 times higher than that of a typical 18-year-old who arrives to the hospital in spontaneous labor. More than 10 times higher. There is nothing low risk about our 36-year-old patients who are included in the NTSV cesarean birth rate. If a hospital's average patient is similar to this 36-year-old, then it really doesn't matter how good the obstetrical care provider's interventions are. They will never, I repeat, never, be able to achieve the target NTSV cesarean birth rate being set by the World Health Organization, Healthy People 2020, the Joint Commission, the Leapfrog Group, or any other organization that is using a cesarean birth measure that does not account for the inherent risk of the women who are giving birth. Conversely, a hospital with mostly 18-year-old patients can have interventions that result in many unnecessary cesarean births, yet they will consistently achieve the target cesarean birth rate. What is most frightening about this is that the interventions being used at hospitals with mostly 18-year-olds could be propagated to other hospitals as being the best interventions, simply because they come from hospitals that have mostly 18-year-old patients, and not because they are the best at decreasing the inherent risk of the women that are giving birth. This frightening thought is why using an unadjusted NTSV rate as a cesarean birth measure creates a tremendous disservice to the women that will give birth. The case mix flaws in the NTSV rate and the fact that it does not account for the inherent risk of the women that are giving birth renders it useless as a cesarean birth measure. In 2011, the World Health Organization recommended using the Robson classification system as a cesarean birth measure. The Robson system classifies all women into one of 10 categories, including an unadjusted NTSV category. With all due respect to the World Health Organization, it is irresponsible to recommend a cesarean birth measure that does not take into account the inherent risk of the women that are giving birth. Women deserve a cesarean birth measure that doesn't ignore the inherent risk of the women who are giving birth. I would like to thank you for taking the time to view this presentation.